Hey there! In this video I'm going to walk you through my process for creating this lovely collection of tiny exploratory texture drawings. I'm creating this drawing in response to the prompt Tiny, which is the third prompt for Mindfultober 2023, but you absolutely don't need to be taking part in Mindfultober to be following along, because this is just a really lovely, relaxing, mindful drawing to create together. The other thing which is great about this drawing is that it's an amazing way to explore your materials, play with creating different patterns and textures, and you can create as many or as few as you'd like. And the added bonus is that it looks really gorgeous when it's done too. So to follow along, you'll need some paper, a pencil, an eraser, a pen to draw with, whatever you feel comfy drawing with, but something that is going to withstand being erased, because we're going to erase pencil lines afterwards, and something circular to draw around that's small. So a coin works pretty well because that's about the right kind of size. But maybe a compass or just any circular object that you have. So we're first going to draw out our circle structures in pencil. So I'm going to create a grid just because that's what appeals to me, but this could also be really cool to just randomly scatter some circle shapes across your page too. So kind of arrange your circles in a way that feels right to you. So to make a grid of circles, if you want to do the same that I'll be doing, I'm first going to need to find the centre of my paper by measuring it with a ruler to find that centre point. And then I will put one of my circles right in the very centre and kind of work out from there. So little tip for you to help get 90-degree angles when you're using, if you're trying to draw a grid or something kind of square. If you have a scrap piece of paper which has come out of a pack, so I haven't cut this by hand, we know that that's nice and square. So I've got my halfway points here, and if I align the edge of this piece of paper with the edge of this piece of paper, then I know that, that this line here, if I use it like a kind of set square, I know that that is going to be a 90-degree angle to the edge of the paper. So we don't always have set squares kind of lying around, but just an ordinary piece of paper will do the exact same job for you. There we are. So I've got the centre of my paper. So I'm going to be pressing a little bit harder with pencil than I would recommend you do, just because pencil marks tend to get very faint and kind of disappear on camera. So try and keep your pencil lines nice and light because it makes them a lot easier to erase later. So I'm going to place the centre of my coin in the centre of that cross and draw around it. Now don't worry about trying to find the middle of the coin because that makes it a bit too fiddly and tricky. Just kind of do it by eye, because honestly by the time you've drawn a few on here and then rubbed out the pencil marks, if it's not exactly in the centre, it just won't notice. So now we have that first circle, we can decide how much we want to space apart the circles, or you could have them touching, so you could put the next circle literally right next to that one. But in order to make a grid straight, it's helpful to use your ruler just to put some guidelines in before you start drawing circles. Even if you're having it touching, it can just help to make sure that they're kind of going to align with each other. So I'm going to bring my scrap piece of paper back again and align the edge of it with the edge of my paper and just align it with the top of that circle. And just add a line across the top and bottom, like this. And I'll also do the same going in this direction, because I'm going to create a kind of grid. So I need to know that I'm aligning them correctly, both horizontally and vertically. Like I said, if this part is kind of filling you with dread, or you think, oh, it's a bit too much of a kind of pain, then it's actually can be a really nice alternative just to draw randomly around circles on a page, it looks really nice. Okay, so I've got my my kind of first bit of grid drawn in. So I would quite like to have mine with a bit of space in between them. I don't want them exactly touching. So let's see, I think I'll probably, just to keep it easy and not have to go into decimals, I think I'm just going to use like 1 centimetre gap between. So I'm just going to mark 1 centimetre all around. And my spare piece of paper is coming back in. It's very handy, this, having just a spare piece of scrap paper. Very important that it's not one that you've cut or torn though. So we know we can rely on the size. It's just really handy to make sure that we've got hopefully nice 90-degree angles. Obviously it doesn't really matter if it goes a bit wonky, it's just if you are someone that quite likes things to be aligned, it's quite nice to give it a go. Okay, so I can now draw in my next circles because they're just going to be touching those points that I've just drawn. So they're going to have it's going to be a 1 centimetre gap now from the middle one. Same over here. And I would quite like to do just a series of 9 circles. So I actually have enough guidelines here to draw them all in, because I've done my 1 centimetre gap from here as well. So I can draw one in there and here. It doesn't matter if you don't have all 4 sides of the coin sort of marked out, because we can be pretty sure if we're matching 2 or 3 points up that it's going to be in pretty much the right place. So you can see for the corner ones, I've got 2 guidelines there, and that should be enough just to make sure that it's in the right place. Okay, so I've got my circle templates drawn out. What we are going to do is fill each circle with a different drawing. Now, you can really draw whatever you like. I'm going to create a variety of different patterns and textures because it's what I am most drawn to using within my personal work. I do that a lot. I find it really relaxing and mindful. But you could create, say, a tiny drawing of a rabbit in one circle, followed by a tiny drawing of a cat, or whatever you're interested in. It could be different botanical drawings or different portraits within each circle, so that what you create is a collection of tiny drawings which are personal to you and what you like to draw and how you like to draw it. They're just slightly smaller. And because there's 9 of them, they make quite a nice collection, or however many circles you're doing if you're doing it slightly differently. Because I'm going to draw patterns in my circles, I am not going to outline them with pen, and this is something which I talk about a lot because I think it can really make a big difference to the overall feel of drawing. Because when you outline something, it tends to flatten it and make it look more two-dimensional, which can be lovely if that's part of your style and the intention is for it to look quite 2D. But I want my, my patterns and textures to look a bit more three-dimensional. So I'm not going to outline my circles. I'm just going to kind of let the pattern fill them and kind of describe that circular shape. Okay, so I am just going to pick which pen I'm going to work with. I think this one. And I'm just going to start just making some marks in them. I want to try out some different textures. So in the first one, I'm just going to make some marks to try and make this kind of look fluffy. So I'm just doing these very small marks, thinking of it like a pom-pom almost, or like a like one of those fluffy dandelion seed heads. So I'm first just going around the outside because I want to define the circle once I've erased the pencil lines, and then I'll start going in to the centre and actually doing some sort of different directions as well of my marks, and pressing quite lightly as well to give it that kind of feathery feeling. Something that's quite nice about this kind of way of approaching this drawing is that it's just a great way to explore your materials. So you could certainly do all sorts of different materials within them and play with them in that way, and use colour or use whatever materials you have to hand. Or you could just stick with the same pen, for example, and just really play with it and push it to figure out all the different effects and textures that you can actually create just with your one tool. And that can be a really fantastic and helpful exercise to do, because then when you come to draw something that's a particular texture, you've kind of got this library already created to just sort of help you identify different textures that you can use in your work. So I'm going to maybe have it slightly lighter towards the middle so it feels a bit 3D. So I'm going to start thinning out some of these textures towards the middle, just so that it perhaps feels a bit more like a sphere than a flat circle. So as we are getting into this drawing and creating these tiny little pattern and texture swatches, one mindful drawing technique that I wanted to share with you for this particular prompt, because it suits it quite well, is counting. And that is as simple as it sounds. It works really well when you're creating a drawing with lots of repetition like this. So I'm just creating the same mark over and over again. And what you can do is literally count the marks as you make them. So I will be going, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 with every stroke of my pen. So the purpose of this is just to keep your mind present with the drawing and in the here and now, which can be very challenging when you're doing something easy and repetitive, because that is when our brain sees it as a golden opportunity to disappear off to your to-do list or what you need to cook for dinner or whatever else is in there in your subconscious. So just counting your strokes can just really help to gently encourage your brain just to stay with us. So just give that a try. It's pretty much exactly the same technique and process of when people say count sheep when you're trying to sleep. It's often just to stop your mind from going off to somewhere where it's finding it quite absorbing and distracting, trying to bring it back by counting, imagining a counting sheep. It's kind of the same thing. So just try that out and see what you think of that. And don't worry if you lose count or realise that you've just stopped counting. Just start again at 1 and carry on. You will lose count. I think it will be impossible for you to keep counting all the way through, just because it takes a bit of practice and getting used to. and it's quite hard to keep our mind engaged for that long, but it's a really interesting mindful practice to try. Okay, so I've pretty much filled up my first circle. I'm going to do another one now. I'm going to do something a bit more 2D, I would say, and just fill it with circles that are touching. So that's going to be a slightly slower counting process. You could think of this a little bit like swatching. If you're somebody who prefers to work in a particular medium, like in, say, watercolour or gouache, or you like to use charcoal or sort of graphite to shade, just adapt what you're filling your circles with to be something which suits what you enjoy working with, and think of it almost as creating swatches for longer and larger drawings. The added bonus is that the swatch looks quite nice at the end, and hopefully you can find some ways of introducing that sort of mindful approach and counting within whatever medium you're choosing to use. I'm just filling this one with lines. It's quite a nice contrast to the other two, and starting in the middle and spreading up and down from that. So I'm just counting each line, so you can see this first texture was very fast counting because the speed and rhythm of the marks I was making was quite quick, and then the second one was a bit slower. And this one is even slower, so it doesn't matter if these marks take you a long time, you can still count. Another thing that you can do if you're drawing something that's very slow is you can count however long it takes to draw a line. So in this example, I could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It might be that that helps to keep you more present if you find that it's taking too long to count in between each shape and your mind is just going elsewhere because of that. So it's another way of giving that a try. Okay, so the next one I'm going to fill with another pattern. This is one that I quite enjoy drawing because it reminds me of knitting. And again, this pattern has quite a long time of completing one row. So just experiment if you're following along with what I'm doing. You might find it more helpful to you to count each loop rather than each row. I feel like I want to do something kind of messy again, a bit more like that, but different. So maybe I'll just do it a bit more randomly. Now this one, because I'm just using one continuous line that's moving, I can't really count individual shapes. So you could just count in your head as you're drawing. And again, I'm kind of doing more pattern around the edge of the circle shape in this one, a bit like the first one, just to kind of give it a little bit of a more three-dimensional feel. It's quite sort of, feels quite wiry. So for the next one, I want to do one of my favourite patterns to draw for mindful drawing, which is the concentric circles. Little tip with if you're drawing something like this, another nice mindful drawing technique is to keep focusing your attention on the exact point where you close the shapes. I find that it really helps to not only keep your mind present, but it also really helps to actually end up ending at the same point where you started the circle as well. If I don't keep that in mind, the point where I started, I often end up going in quite a completely different direction. Because these circles are so tiny, something that's quite nice about this approach as well is if you are someone who is very pushed for time, but you just like to do even a tiny creative thing each day, you could set up a sort of load of circles and just tackle one each day, because it's, you know, you can literally just spend a couple of minutes then on filling one in whatever way you choose. And that can be a really nice way of approaching something like this. It feels a lot more manageable when these things are smaller. And because these are abstract, they don't need to look like anything in particular. I think that can take away some of the pressure that can sometimes sort of stop us from actually getting started. If you want to kind of develop a bit more of a regular creative habit, it's sometimes that barrier of just the thinking, well, what am I going to draw and how am I going to draw it? If you set yourself up a structure like this, where it's very clear and easy, you can just go in and it doesn't matter what it looks like, it doesn't matter what it is. It can just help to lower that barrier to starting, which can be really helpful. As if it's a sphere. It sort of feels like it's spinning. Quite challenging to do this on such a tiny scale, but it's quite nice and enjoyable just to try. It's kind of like doodling, just imagining doing a bit of shading on a sphere just from your imagination rather than from an actual reference photo. It can be a nice sort of practice to enjoy just trying out some marks that can help to describe shadow and volume as well. So I quite like the mix that I have got kind of going on of both 2D and 3D feel to my circles. It may be that one approach appeals to you more than the other, so don't feel that you have to do both approaches. Just fill your circles in ways that feel right for you. There might be certain ways that you enjoy doodling or drawing or playing with your materials that really would suit filling in these kind of little swatches or circles. So this one that I'm drawing with the dots, I'm also considering kind of half dots or 3/4 dots on the edge of the circle, just so that it helps to describe that circular shape, because if you don't have any that are on the edge, it can be difficult to imagine that sort of defined circle shape. Okay, so one to fill in. What shall I do in this one? It's quite nice to not have a plan sometimes, just to experiment as you go, and that can be a particularly nice approach if you're doing it over several days as well. I think I'd like to work with the circle shape again, so I'm going to outline it. I know I said don't outline it, but this is part of the pattern, so I'd like to create a kind of feeling of it growing. So I'm going to introduce some lines, kind of like the rings of a tree. Okay, so I've filled in out all my circles. I'm just going to erase the pencil lines just to see if I need to tweak any little areas if I haven't quite filled them in. Okay, so here we go. I hope you enjoyed this and found you were able to relax through the drawing process. If you're taking part in Mindfultober, then please share your drawing and tag both Shelley and myself on Instagram. If you're not taking part in Mindfultober, then I'd still absolutely love to see your drawing. So do feel free to share it on Instagram and tag me, or why not come and join my Facebook community and share your work there. It's a really lovely, warm and welcoming little group, and we'd love to have you there. If you enjoyed this video, it would be really awesome if you could just hit the thumbs up button and also subscribe to my channel, where I'll be sharing more content like this. Okay, so I hope I'll see you in another video soon. Bye for now.